long ball is going to go for a touchdown. The game's over. Webster Slaughter.
Metcalf will go for the score. Unbelievable.
45-40. Run, William, run. He's got blockers in front. 5. Touchdown. Joshua Cribbs turns disaster into a score.
Sight wants it all on this one for Logan, and he is there.
Jim Brown to the 30. Jim Brown is going to go in for another touchdown.
The Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield.
Wow. It is Baker Mayfield.
Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to another episode of the 1085 Gridiron Podcast. It is episode number 68. I am your host, Anthony Joki, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jack McCurry of I almost screwed up. North Coast Sports. I almost said Cleveland Sports. That's what it used to be. But it is the North Coast Sports. How you doing tonight, Jack?
I'm doing great, man. You know, preseason's over, and Steelers week is finally here. I am pumped.
It sure is. But before... We'll be back later in the week to preview Pittsburgh and whatnot. But tonight we're going to discuss majority of the roster cuts that took place between the last preseason game and today, as well as we're going to discuss the Khalil Mack deal that went down as well that unfortunately didn't involve the Browns. But first, there was one last preseason game since we last talked. And did you have any major takeaways from that last preseason game, or was it just the fourth and final preseason game and just needed to get it out of the way?
It was just a preseason game. Get it out of the way. Like I said on the last episode with Steven, that game's a snooze fest. It was nice to see Baker Mayfield out there. I thought he played great, albeit against Detroit's backups, which most of those guys are bagging groceries starting tomorrow. But, you know, there were some flashes. You know, Matthew Days I thought played well. Hilliard, who was the fifth running back that no one ever really talked about, I thought he had some flashes. And other than that, and of course Nate Orchard had his pick six, but other than that, it was a real snooze fest.
Yeah, I was at a fundraiser, so I was somewhat watching it, but I was mostly pouring down beers for most of that game and really wasn't paying too much attention to it. But, you know, that's how that game is. It's really not that important. But, you know, there were some things that I liked. I thought Baker looked all right. Days looked good. You mentioned Nate Orchard, who's no longer here. But before we discuss all the roster cutdowns, let's discuss probably what has been the biggest trade in NFL this offseason, and that is that Khalil Mack was traded from the Oakland Raiders to the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears gave up 2 first-round picks. I believe they also swapped picks in the second and third rounds and gave up a later-round pick as well. What do you think of the move by Oakland to trade Khalil Mack to Chicago, as well as how do you view this from the Bears side of things?
Well, from the Oakland side of things, I still do not understand why they did it. I know there's been reports that they're in financial peril, and I get that. They spent, I think, almost $400 million on relocation fees to move the team from Oakland to Las Vegas, which is happening, I think, in the next year or two. And, you know, obviously they spent a lot of money to get John Gruden to come out of retirement to come coach, and he seems, by all accounts, to be running the entire franchise, which you kind of feel for guys like Reggie McKenzie in the front office who were working on building that roster and bringing the Raiders back into contention, only for Gruden to come in and some of the moves he's made during this offseason to be really head-scratching and really dumb, including this one. But I don't understand why you would trade a top 3 defensive player in this league like Khalil Mack. And on the Bears side, you know, it just adds to what was already a really good young defense. And you think they added Roquan Smith in the draft, and now they just picked up Khalil Mack. Their defense got stronger. I think it's bringing the Bears closer to being back into contention themselves. It all depends on how Mitchell Trubisky develops as a quarterback. But I love the move for the Bears, and I feel really bad for the Oakland franchise, the fans, and the players on that team, because it just makes you wonder what Gruden's going to do next.
Yeah, they've done everything to pretty much piss off that fan base. Between the move to Las Vegas that'll take place here soon. The trading of Khalil Mack, so that fan base is really hurting. And for a fan base that's stuck with this team for a long period of time, it kind of sucks to see all that happen. We talk about how we've had tough luck here with our fan base, and we deserve better, and so does Oakland too. So, it sucks to see that happen. But from the Chicago Bears side of things, they had the 10th ranked defense last year, and to add Roquan Smith and Khalil Mack to that front seven, it's going to be very interesting to see how that shakes out. I'm sure. That doesn't make the other quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, and
Kirk Cousins.
They might be staying up a little bit later at night with that defensive front. So, it's a very rough time to be a quarterback in the NFC North. But if you're on the Bears defense, you gotta love everything that's been going on. And you mentioned Trubisky. A lot does depend on for the Bears. How Trubisky takes a step forward from his rookie season to his second season, and if he's able to take a step forward, I would say the playoffs are still a long shot. But if he plays an above average quarterback position this year, it's possible that they could make it. That is a stacked division, though. When you have the Green Bay Packers and the Minnesota Vikings in that division, it's a stacked division, and the NFC is stacked as well. So it's tough to make the playoffs in the NFC. But if Trubisky can't perform well, there's an outside shot that they could make it. From the Browns side of things, the Bears did give up 2 first-round picks. Were you willing to give up 2 first-round picks to get Khalil Mack?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, he's a at least a top 5 defensive player in this league. Benjamin Albright threw it out, and he had put in this poll up. He said, would you trade your 2015 and 2016 first-round picks for Khalil Mack? And that's essentially multiple first-round picks. Well, you go back to our history. Our 2015 first-round picks were Cam Irving and Danny Shelton. Granted, that was 2 in 1 draft. And then also 2016, we drafted Corey Coleman. So would I trade those 3 players essentially for Khalil Mack? 100 times out of 100, I would do that. My understanding of it is that the Oakland was also discussing players with the Browns, and Daryl Ryder reported it that he heard Christian Kirksey's name was out there, Jamie Collins' name was out there, and Emmanuel Ogba's name was out there. If I would have traded one of those guys, I wouldn't essentially traded 2 first-round picks. I would have come down and maybe make it like a first along with a second-round pick or a third-round pick in one of those players. But if it was 2 1s and also they wanted a player, I probably wouldn't have done it. But, I was too bad that the Browns couldn't pull off the deal for him. But, it is what it is. I still feel really good about our defense going into 2018.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think our defense is pretty solid, and we saw over the roster cutdowns how there were a lot of depth moves made to help strengthen the defensive line and the linebacking core as well. And we'll talk about those in a little bit. I think I probably would have given up 2 first-rounders, but going into next offseason, obviously offensive line is going to be extremely important. I would imagine that's going to be a focus in the first round, whether it's left tackle or possibly a center. We'll see. But, it's a shame that we could have had him and Derek Carr. Instead, we ended up with Justin Gilbert and Johnny Manziel, and that's really unfortunate. But enough of that. Let's move on. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the Browns cut down their roster to 53 players. Some of the major cuts, some of the major names are Caleb Brantley, defensive tackle, was a kind of a surprise. Nate Orchard, I don't know if he was a surprise, but I think after him being here for a few years already, he was someone that was on the chopping block. Simeon Thomas, their 6th-round pick. I was very surprised that they cut him. I was hoping he'd land on the practice squad, but he was claimed already. Let's see. Matthew Days was cut. He played very well in the last preseason game. Devin Kajus, the star of Hard Knocks, or one of the stars of Hard Knocks, was also cut. Jack, taking a look at these first initial round of cuts, what was your impression of the moves that the Browns made to get down to 53?
Well, my first impression was if you were featured on Hard Knocks, good chance you didn't make the roster, as it shows with Orchard and Kajus being cut part of the final cutdowns. You know, Matthew Days, watching him play against Detroit on last Thursday night, I had this feeling like maybe the Browns would keep him on, you know, at least as a special teams guy. He showed the ability to kick return last year and his rookie season. And, of course, you know, he ran the ball extremely well against Detroit, albeit against their backups, which a lot of those guys got cut and didn't even make it get picked up by other teams, which just shows you how poor Detroit's depth is. But Caleb Brantley, you know, with him, you know, we all seen the flashes of talent. He was projected, I think, a 2nd-round pick coming out in 2017, but obviously some potential legal issues dropped him down to the 5th round when the Browns drafted him. You know, the talent was there, but obviously a lot of people had already reported on this, that it was his ability to not be lazy. And I think when you're looking at what John Dorsey is trying to build here in terms of a roster, if you're not going to go out there when it's your time to go and you're not giving a maximum effort, then why keep you around? And I think they went ahead and made the decision that they weren't going to put their effort into Brantley if Brantley wasn't going to put his full effort out on the football field.
You know, not only was it effort, but I think injuries had something to do with it as well. It was hard for him to stay on the field with those. You know, we've talked about in the past the best availability is being available, or something like that. I'm sure I butchered that quote that I've said in the past, but you get the point. You need to be available, and when you are consistently unavailable, it does not bode well for you in terms of making the roster. So, you know, you mentioned the consistency as well. You know, you have one good play, take 2 plays off. Have one good play, take 2 plays off. When you're the 6th, 7th guy on the defensive line, even 8th or 9th, you need to, you know, play your ass off. Otherwise, you're going to get cut, and that's what happened with Brantley here, and it's kind of unfortunate. Looking at the next wave of cuts, and these are players that they cut to make room for the 5 guys that they claimed. Some of the names that they did cut was Austin Ryder, Jamie Meter, Carl Nassib, Jermaine Grace, and Jeremiah McKinnon. Looking at those 5 guys, are you surprised that both Nassib and Meter were cut from the Browns?
At first, you know, when the speculation was coming out before the team officially announced it, you know, it is kind of a shock. You know, Meter's been around since 2014. Nassib was the team's 3rd-round pick in 2016. So they've been around for a while. The, you know, Browns fans got acclimated with them, especially, you know, Meter. He made the big blocked kick against the Chargers, which if it wasn't for that, we could potentially be looking at back-to-back 0-16 seasons for the Browns. And, you know, he is a Cleveland native, so, you know, we do love the hometown guys a lot more. And Nassib, you know, we grew to love him even more through Hard Knocks as the team's unofficial financial advisor, whether or not he was giving out accurate info on those financial tips. But, you know, when you look at those guys, they're essentially one-trick ponies, and you know, they're able to do one thing really well. And, you know, the Browns need versatile defensive linemen. And especially in Greg Williams' system, if you can't do what the coaches ask you to do, that you're unfortunately going to have to be let go. And they're going to be able to bring guys in that are able to do the versatile things on the defensive front that Greg Williams needs.
Absolutely. You know, I was surprised to see asked to go. I wasn't surprised about Meter. He was someone who I thought that the Browns would cut. When we've done our podcast here the last few weeks, I thought that he was someone that could go. As 5 of the guys that they did claim are defensive lineman Carl Davis, defensive lineman Fidi Odin-Ugbo, I didn't put the G in there, center Aaron Neary, cornerback Tavier Thomas, and linebacker Tanner Vallejo, who was previously with Buffalo. Looking at these 5 guys, who really catches your eye in terms of these guys that the Browns claimed?
Oh, it's the first 2 guys you mentioned, Carl Davis, who was with Baltimore, and Odinobo, who was with the Minnesota Vikings. I've seen some articles about the top waiver claims, and those 2 guys were on one person's list. And like I said, these guys are versatile defensive linemen. They're going to be able to come in. Odinobo, when you look at that Vikings defense, there's a lot of depth, and unfortunately, he was one of the guys that got let go. Had a pretty solid preseason with 11 tackles and 2 sacks, and he had a really high pass rushing grade on Pro Football Focus. So, obviously he's going to come in, he'll be on the back end of the depth chart, but if he impresses enough in practice, I'm sure Greg Williams and Clyde Simmons will have no problem inserting him into the game on that defensive unit. And, with the ability of guys like Garrett and Agba to kick inside, play D tackle, maybe you look at a situation where they throw out Chris Smith and they throw out Odinobo as the defensive ends, and like Garrett and Agba play D tackle for a sub package. So those guys catch my eye. Obviously, Neary, Thomas, and Vallejo are depth guys. Thomas and Vallejo you'll probably see on special teams. So, if these guys can make an impact in any form, it'd be great for the Browns, obviously. But that back end of the roster is always very fluid, and you'll see guys come in and out during the season.
Looking at who they already have on the defensive line, and looking at the guys that they picked up on the defensive line, would you consider the defensive line as maybe the deepest unit on the roster?
Yeah, to a degree, yes. Obviously, you don't know about Chris Smith yet. He was lackluster in the preseason. Chad Thomas, who was our team's 3rd-round pick, didn't show a lot in the preseason. Obviously, he was coming off an injury, so maybe the Browns were being cautious with him. And they also picked up Devereaux Lawrence, who was with the New Orleans Saints. We traded a 2019 7th-round pick, so the depth is a question mark. Obviously, I like the guys up front on the first team with Garrett, Ogunjobi, Coley, and Agba. But I think the depth can be there. It's just a matter of will it show up. Obviously, you're going to have sub packages where you have Avery coming off as a pass rusher. Maybe he puts his hand down in the dirt. Jamie Collins is also another option. So, you look at the depth chart, for instance, and you see these guys and you wonder about it. I feel confident that Carl Davis is going to be solid for us. I think he was just it was a numbers game in Baltimore, and also he might not have fit their defensive scheme. But the other guys I'm questioning, but I do trust, Clyde Simmons, who was a great pass rusher and also a great coach, that he can get the best out of these guys up front.
Yeah, I really like Odinobo. From most of the things I've read, you mentioned with Davis being a numbers game, same with Odinobo as well in Minnesota. They have a really good front 7, and there was really no room left for him to be on the roster. So I'm glad that he was one of the guys that the Browns did claim, and he's on our roster now. I think he has the potential to really grow into something, and I think he'll be a lot more productive than Carl Nassib was at defensive end. Looking at the guys, they signed 10 guys to their practice squad. That's the maximum you're allowed to have. They do have an 11th, but he is, I believe you said, the NFL international exemption or something to that effect. The 10 guys that they have on their practice squad are defensive linemen. Daniel, I don't want to say ukulele. That can't be right. But do you have it or not?
I think it's Daniel Ikule.
Ikule. Okay. I don't know why I want to say ukulele, but looking at that word at first glance, that's what popped in my head. Defensive linemen, Zakoven Henderson. Running back, Dontrell Hilliard. Defensive back, Montrell Meander. Offensive lineman, Christian DeLauro. Wide receiver, Damari Scott. Defensive back, Jeremiah McKinnon. I'm glad that he wasn't playing and they were able to sneak him onto the practice squad. Linebacker, Brady Sheldon. Offensive lineman, Kyle Callis.
Yeah, you're right.
Callis. And tight end, Pharaoh McKeever. I mentioned Jeremiah McKinnon as a guy that I'm really happy that they were able to get onto their practice squad. Looking at this practice squad, do you expect, we always see injuries in the NFL, but do you expect any of these guys to crack into the top 53 at some point in the season and possibly contribute?
I mean, yeah, like you said, injuries happen all the time. Wouldn't be surprised if we see perhaps DeLauro come up on the offensive line. I had heard that Bob Wiley was high on that kid. He's also a Northeast Ohio native, went to Green High School. Damari Scott, you could see a scenario where if Derek Willis, who is on the 53-man roster right now, he gets cut. Scott showed some flashes in the preseason. He might get called up. McKinnon, obviously, I think a lot of people liked his versatility in the secondary. That, if another corner would happen to go down, I think McKinnon could get the call up. But a lot of these guys, they might go in and out. They might look at other guys and want to bring them in on the practice squad. The one thing I liked about this is 8 out of the 10 guys were part of the Browns preseason roster, so they have the familiarity of the system. Obviously, Callis and McKeever are new additions. Callis went to Lakewood, or lived in Lakewood, went to St. Ed's. Didn't grade out very well when he got the chance to play last year in Washington and Indianapolis as a guard. So that one was a head scratcher. I seen on Brown's Twitter, a lot of people were wondering why they brought him in, but I do like that they kept a lot of the guys that from the preseason on our practice squad.
Yeah, you mentioned the familiarity is very nice when you have the guys on the practice squad. If there is an injury and a guy goes down, having a guy on your practice squad that can jump in there right away and know the scheme, know the playbook is very helpful. So, hopefully, we don't expect too much from practice squad guys throughout the season. Just, they're there as a depth. So, like I said, with injuries, something's bound to happen at some point. But hopefully, we don't have to rely on the practice squad too much this season. One name I didn't notice, A, on our roster, guys that were claimed, and B, the practice squad. Did Matthew Day sign anywhere? I haven't seen anything.
I did see this morning that he was working out for a team, so he didn't get picked up by anybody. I would imagine he'll definitely get looked at from some other teams just because of his versatility, that he can run the ball. He can, obviously be a kick returner. He was our kick returner last year. He is working out for the Detroit Lions, according to Ian Rappaport. So hopefully Days gets a look. I think he can be a running back in this league, whether he'll probably be a backup at best, but he can definitely play football, and it showed last Thursday night.
Yeah, definitely. It's disappointing that he got cut because I really liked him over the last couple of years. But when you brought in Carlos Hyde and Nick Chubb, he was on his way out, and you re-signed Duke Johnson as well. So, unfortunately, Days was a casualty of a numbers game here in Cleveland, but hopefully wherever he goes, I think he'll definitely be able to contribute because I really like him as a running back, and hopefully he goes somewhere that he can contribute and do a good job, and hopefully he has a good career post his time here with the Browns. Looking at, there's one more thing we were going to talk about. The offensive line. It's been a roller coaster with the offensive line for this entire preseason. And when Hugh Jackson spoke to the media I want to say it was Sunday. There were a lot of interesting tidbits and quotes and reading between the lines that there could be the possibility that Desmond Harrison is starting at left tackle this Sunday against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they would move Antonio back to left guard. Would that be a complete mismanagement of the roster? I won't say the roster, but the offensive line unit, because you went through the entire preseason with, first you started with Sean Coleman at left tackle. That didn't work out, so you moved Joel Bitonio to left tackle. First you moved Greg Robinson to left tackle, had Bitonio at guard still. Then you moved Bitonio to left tackle, moved Austin Corbett in as your left guard. Now you're considering putting Desmond Harrison in the left tackle, then, moving Bitonio back to the left guard. Is this just been a complete mess with the offensive line this preseason?
Yeah, I don't know if I call it a mess. I do think that they have handled it poorly. There's no doubt about that. I think, when they moved Bitonio to left tackle and they moved Corbett to left guard, I thought, just let this play out. And, Corbett is transitioning to a new position. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He was a left tackle in college. He's playing a whole new position. And Bitonio met with the media on Monday and said that Corbett's starting to get what he has to do as a guard. And, Bitonio was there 4 years ago when he came out in Nevada. He was a left tackle and he had to make the transition as well. I think we can see Desmond Harrison's ability to play left tackle, and I think he's still very raw. This is a guy that, started out at community college, got to Texas, didn't even play there because he was suspended, then was out of football for 2 years, went to West Georgia, had a great year, got to go to the Senior Bowl, then tested well at the Combine, but, there was still the concern, so that's why he didn't get drafted. And luckily, the Browns were in the situation to pick him up. I think he can be the long-term answer at left tackle, but I don't know if, unless they are working on this behind the scenes and we don't know about it, it would be, I think, crazy to go ahead and reshuffle the offensive line during the preparation for week 1. Maybe at some point during the season, if you want to do it, that's fine, but I wouldn't throw Harrison out there unless he's absolutely ready, because he's going to have to guard Cameron Hayward, and that's a big task for an undrafted rookie making his first start in week 1 of NFL season. So at this point, unless Corbett, who did grade out poorly on Pro Football Focus during the preseason, unless he's absolutely not cut out to be a guard, and then maybe the Browns want to put him at another spot perhaps, then okay, go ahead and make the change. But if you're just doing this as a panic move, then it's really bad, and it might be really bad for the Browns as a whole going into Sunday against Pittsburgh.
Yeah, if Harrison's starting week 1 against Pittsburgh this Sunday, you're right about the Cameron Hayward thing. As much as we love him for being a Buckeye, he has not been too fond with us playing him on Sundays as a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I would hope that a lot of this is just noise and there's not a whole lot to it. Now, I'm pleased to think that, maybe Harrison is somebody in the future that they view as left tackle. Maybe he's the left tackle of the future and he just needs more seasoning, more practice, more reps to get things down. When you'll probably be going up against Myles Garrett in practice pretty much every day, playing on the scout team and whatnot for the second string. So he's going to get a lot of good experience. Now, Sean Coleman was thrown into that, and that didn't work out too well for him. He got abused a lot by Garrett, but hopefully it's a different story with Harrison. And if they view him as somebody that could potentially, I won't say replace, but come after Joe Thomas as your starting left tackle, then you wouldn't have to waste potentially a first round pick, second round pick next year on a left tackle. And I I can't believe I mentioned next year's draft already. You can shoot me for that one later. But, if you don't have to spend a high draft pick on a left tackle, and you can go into next season with Harrison as your starting one and move Antonio back to guard, I think that would be a huge win for the Browns, especially with Harrison coming in as a UDFA.
Yeah, definitely. And then people have brought it up about Corbett that potentially maybe if they do make the switch and they put Harrison at left tackle and slide Antonio back over to left guard, there's been speculation that maybe Corbett is the long-term center, which, I mean, I don't know. I'm not an offensive line guru by any means, but I just have this feeling like that's the Cam Irving experiment all over again. Irving's rookie year, they had him backing up Mack, then he was playing guard. Then towards the end of his run here in Cleveland, he was playing tackle, and it's like, if you didn't have a specific position in mind for Corbett, why'd you draft him 33rd overall when there was other talent available, including Will Hernandez, who was a stud coming out of UTEP and could have easily slid into left guard, and you could have started the process with Antonio at left tackle right after the draft. So, but I trust John Dorsey until he proves me wrong. So, I mean, we'll go with what we got now, but I mean, it'll be interesting to see what becomes of Corbett now if they do make this switch.
I would agree with you on the Corbett front with the Cameron comparison, except for the fact that I have not seen Austin Corbett get absolutely abused this preseason like we saw with Cameron Irving. So that's where I have more confidence in Corbett moving forward than Cam. So if they do decide to move him to the center and he's a long-term answer there, that's perfectly fine with me. Like you said, we both trust Dorsey that he's going to do the right thing. We trust his scouting prowess and the way he's been able to put together teams in the past. And look at the offensive line he put in front of, I want to say he did a lot of it, but he helped put an offensive line in front of Aaron Rodgers that includes some really good players. So I think that when it comes to the O-line, he built a good one in Kansas City as well. He obviously signed Mitchell Schwartz, which was very helpful for them as well. So I have faith in Dorsey when it comes to building offensive lines, and hopefully it's not something we're too worried about, because I think throughout the entire preseason, the offensive line has been the biggest concern. In years past, it hasn't been, mostly due to the fact that we've had Joe Thomas here for the longest time. So moving forward, the offensive line is the biggest question, and until Dorsey answers that question with the players he puts out there, I think that's something we'll definitely have to keep our eye on and keep on looking at. Before we get out of here, is there anything else you want to discuss?
No, we covered everything for this episode.
Awesome. All right, go ahead and plug everything you got going on.
As always, check out my site, thenorthcoastsports.com, for all the latest on Cleveland sports. Have a lot coming up this week, obviously, with the Browns and Steelers opening to the season, as well as my NFL predictions will be out later this week. Follow me on Twitter at JMcCurryCLE, and check out the other podcasts that myself and Anthony do, the North Coast Sportscast. We did our Ohio State preview last week. Hopefully we'll find some time to record an episode this week to recap the Ohio State opener, and obviously the big trade the Indians made last week with the acquisition of Josh Donaldson.
As always, you can follow this show on Twitter and on Facebook at 1085Gridiron. You can follow me personally at Anthony Joki, that is Joki at the end. You can find our podcast on Spotify, that is the most recent platform that we've got our podcast on. We're also on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, Overcast, pretty much any platform that you can think of. We are on. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. We'd absolutely appreciate it. I saw that we're up to 10 reviews on iTunes. Keep those coming. Maybe when we hit 25, we'll do some kind of giveaway when we hit 25 reviews. We'll have to talk about that. as for now, we have plenty of stuff going on this week. You'll hear our voice a lot. If you continue to download our shows, I think we have 6 episodes coming out this week. It's a big week for us. And with that, I'll leave you with this, as I do at the end of every podcast, and that is, go Browns.